I'm going to read our
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Blair,
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner P,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherino,
Yes.
Vice Chair Piercy.
yes. Does everybody have a copy of the landfills and who owns them? Mr. Harris had requested this, and is any part of that you'd like to go over, Mr. Harris?
I'm sorry, sir.
Is there any part of this you would like to discuss or go over tonight?
The only one, I don't see, okay, I do, I'm sorry. Obion County is Republic, and Waste Management is Anderson and Benton. So I was just wanting to see the two big guys where they're, how many landfills they owned throughout Tennessee.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. From that point, we'll move on to our RFP process. Our last meeting, we covered the first page pretty in-depth. I don't really see any need of going over it line for line tonight, but if anyone has any questions on the first page, on the community education or collection, I'll be more than glad to take questions, comments, and we'll go over all of it that y'all see fit. Mr. Harris.
So on our RFP, can we request to give us their 5-year goal as far as education? Is that something that we could ask for their strategy plan to what they can do for this county within the next 5 years? Because, I mean, this is a huge undertaking, education. So
It really
instead of
is.
them just saying, yeah, we'll do it, then what is your plan? And that's kind of what I'm going at with that. And I'm going to have a lot of these tonight, sir, so I apologize.
I would say at this point, we're at the point we can ask them to do anything. We can do anything. I had one concern, what age group are we going to target in our schools to educate on it? Because there's pre-K through 12, and I don't see how you could take the same program and touch pre-K and kindergarten that you could touch 11th and 12th grade. There's going to have to be a mix of that somehow or another. We just can't have one paper and pass it out here. They're going to have to work with different age groups on that. Anybody else? Becky, do you have anything you need to add to this? Or?
I don't. I just wanted to make sure that you all, if you had questions or follow-up, exactly what you all have talked about, just to make sure I got those notes down.
Anyone else?
I mean, did you understand what I'm talking about, Becky? As far as for them to tell us what their plan is for education for our county,
Yes.
if
and
they
I think,
awarded the bid.
I think that's that's acceptable, and to ask them ahead of time, they'll see that in the RFP for their response.
Thank you.
Mr. P., can you hear us tonight? Do you have anything to add?
No, not really, other than as far as education goes, I think the younger we touch these kids, the better off we'll be. It's never too young to learn. One book I read says, teach a child when they're young and they'll keep that mindset the rest of their life. So I think starting early would be a good thing.
Okay, thank you. If everybody's good, we will leave the community education portion and step on down to the collection portion. Does anyone have any open questions on that one? Comments, concerns, additions?
Mr. Chairman, is there any way that Becky can tell us exactly how would a curbside pickup be for a county of this size?
So typically, curbside collection is left for more dense areas or subdivisions, if you will, residential development. And so in this case, I would envision the areas of your unincorporated county that have seen more growth, that truly have some residential subdivisions, that those areas could lend themselves to a curbside program. Obviously, the city of Murfreesboro already does curbside service in their city limits. You also have Smyrna, Laverne, and Eagleville that may have the opportunity to do curbside service as well.
So if we have a big subdivision in unincorporated areas, we could get curbside service for that?
You could, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Blair?
In some of the information that Rachel sent us today regarding the flow, I thought I understood that the Supreme Court said that we did have control over the flow. But perusing through some of this paperwork, it made me question whether or not we have total control over the flow. So is that the issue, that it's just kind of up in the air and it's not a guarantee that we have total control over the flow of residential waste?
I think if the Supreme Court made a ruling, was that our state Supreme Court or U.S.?
When I read it, I'm not sure that I understood which Supreme Court it was. I apologize, Mayor.
Well, any state Supreme Court, other Supreme Courts are going to opine based on what other ones have done, and even if it goes all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. But if it's the U.S. Supreme Court and we have control on flow control, then you're not going to get any higher decision than that. So, you agree with that?
I would just say it's something to look at overall. Flow control is a tough battle. A lot of communities have tried it. It does work if it's publicly owned and publicly operated facility. But again, you want to make sure that you've got all of your components in place in order to keep your system running. Typically, that shuts down a lot of competition.
Mr. Nolan?
I'm not positive on this, but I would believe if you put it out for bid and in the bid spec says you will dispose of that waste at this location, then you should be covered. But if you throw it out to where anybody can bid on it and no designation on where it's disposed of, then no, you can't control it that way.
But I believe we can designate what routes, and I think that's been brought up before. Chairman P. and even myself, I've mentioned that about the possibility of being able to control those same routes that are on state roads. And since we're the host county, we should have some control on that and make sure that our litter patrol or our litter crews are out making sure that that's picked up with those state dollars as well. I think that's probably why the Supreme Court ruled in that favor, because it's bringing trash into wherever, and we should be able to control that because there's always trash going to be flying out of those trucks.
Anyone else? Mr. Harris?
Me?
Let's Mr. P.
Would this be a good time to ask if since we were talking about curbside services there, would we be talking about a single stream, or have we made a decision whether we are even looking at that yet?
I don't think that decision has been made yet. Do y'all? We haven't touched on that.
Well, my question might be to Becky or maybe Mac is how would single stream versus sorting or whatever look like on a curbside type service?
Mr. Nolan?
The more simple you make it, the better participation you have. So if you have the can, like we had one proposal put it all in one can. They'll take it to their location, then they'll sort it out. You'll have a better participation from your residents by doing it that way. Then the next easiest is like a single stream recycle only. There's a company here in town that does that, and then our centers are, you separate it hopefully before you arrive and put it individually. We have still experiencing contamination issues, but that is nationwide. That's just not us.
Would it not be better in the beginning when this is all started and we're trying to educate our children on how to recycle and all, wouldn't it work better if we done, like you said, get it all and then have it sorted out in the beginning and then try to hope children learn and they teach the adults and the adults learn as time goes on rather than just trying to force it on them all at one time?
Absolutely. At some point, I'd ask for all y'all to try to remember everything you threw away all week. So we need to discuss that, and that'll help kind of direct our decision-making process as well.
Y'all ready to play the trash game? What did you throw away, Mr. Harris?
I don't know, that's a trick question.
Just parts of it.
I wanted to own collections on bullet points 4, 5, and 6. It says where the county to continue own existing and future convenience centers. Can we ask them in RFP if they would be interested in taking over our convenience centers? And if they take over those convenience centers, will they be charging us? And what will be the charge for that? Is that something we can ask?
You are more than welcome to add anything like that in there. I think if we add it as a statement based on what you want, that gives them, this is what we want, how are you going to do that? That's what the RFP would give us. So if you want them to give you information on existing convenience centers, we want you to operate them, or we want to know what your proposal would be to operate them. Does that make sense?
I think there's a number in there, and I'd like to see what the number is.
I kind of agree, Mr. Chairman, with Chairman Harris. I'd kind of like to go down, because Becky's put all these in here with question marks, and for us to answer yes or no, we'd like to see that. There's a lot of unknown. We can ask the question, would you like to have, in bullet point 4, do you want the county to continue owning existing and future convenience centers? Well, tell us, are you interested? Because we don't really know, and if we don't want to own them and we want them to own them, what are we going to get out of it? So it's one of those things. I would say yes, just for the purposes of discussion, but then if they're going to charge us, no. It's one of those things we don't know. So answering yes or no to each one of these questions, is it something we want to entertain, put it into the RFP, and say, yes, we are interested in hearing what your proposal would be. And then she can put them in the matrix, and we look at every company and say, well, we propose this, but it's going to cost you. Well, then no.
I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, right.
If, you put that in there, I wanted to say at what cost.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's a bargaining tool. And that's something that I'm looking at. But I know that it's not going to be free, so I just want to know how much it'll cost.
Chairman,
Blair?
in the collection process, are we going to ask for, with curbside, that we have a can for household waste and recyclables? And if we are going to ask for recyclables, I've noticed in Davidson County, they throw everything recyclable into one bin. So with that bin goes the cardboard and the soda cans or other refreshments, and all of that stuff, all of the good cardboard gets contaminated. I assume that it's contaminated even with the soda, even if it's not a pizza box.
Yeah.
So is the only recyclable or true recyclable is the metal? I'm just wondering out loud.
If the top of your pizza box doesn't have cheese on it, you're okay. The bottom probably got grease and cheese on it and pepperoni. You got to throw that away because it's contaminated. I think everything that we ask for needs to have a price on it because let's not forget, Rutherford County is dumping for free right now. And we can't forget that. So there's going to have to be a price, and then that's when we kind of go down and say, okay, well, I think this company's a little bit cheaper, but somebody has to buy the containers for those recyclables to go in, and they're going to have to charge our citizens, some fee to do that. So it's going to be, how do we do that? We let them charge them, they put it on their water bill. These are all questions. It all comes down to price. Mac?
A little history lesson right quick. Now, it won't take long, I promise. When the convenience centers here in Rutherford County were started, they had two private haulers, Waste Management and BFI. BFI had the most of them. And it had BFI equipment. Waste Management had Waste Management equipment in those. And then in 93-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood, the county decided they need to buy their own trucks and have their own equipment. So then the county bought all the equipment to go into the centers, which was one compactor and two open tops at each center, and then they bought some trucks. At the time that BFI was hauling each of those loads, it was $100 for the haul and disposal combined together. I think Waste was fairly close to that as well. Then the county started hauling it themselves. So I've been with Waste Management, BFI, and we've hauled convenience centers for counties and did it in many different ways. So what you have to look at is, if you're going to let them run the center, do you want them to buy your equipment? The answer is yes, because if they damage it, then they have to repair it instead of you. So you got to surplus all that equipment and let it go somehow or another. Then you don't need your trucks, so you're going to need to sell your trucks as well. A lot of the counties that went that route have since gone backwards and doing it themselves again for different reasons. But there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. So if you want to get out of the trucking business, that's one way to do it. Curbside collection, City of Murfreesboro has the trucks and the containers. I think they're interested in looking to see what the cost would be, but don't know that it would change anything. I know when it was back in the late 90s, we looked at the City of Murfreesboro to see if we could do a better job than they did. We could not. They were doing a good enough job, and their prices was right. We'd love to have the business, but we couldn't save them any money. So there's a lot of factors you have to look into when you go that direction. The other factor is you don't want to sell your centers. Those you need to keep those. Then the employees within the center, whose employees are they? They can be either direction, either way you want to go. We've done it both ways. So there's a lot of different facets in it. And then the other thing is who they call. If they have a complaint on how the center is operated, who gets the phone call?
Are you ready to discuss your next bullet point? I think we got a yes on the first one. Yes. Would it be, do you want the county to continue controlling operation existing and future convenience centers? Is that your next one? Mr. Harris?
No, sir, it's not. I'd like to look into seeing, I understand where Mac's coming from, but also I'd like to see if a company can completely take over our convenience centers and completely take that off the county. And whether we do it or not, I'd at least like to know a number.
Okay.
Most of my question, Mr. Chairman, is a simple fact, is like what the mayor says. Ask for everything, and then see, ask for everything that we can, and that is our negotiating power. But there's a price tag for a lot of things that we do, and there's a price tag for convenience centers by the county. County pays for that. So if there's any way to alleviate a tax burden or monies for our citizens, we got to address that. So I know I'm going on and on, but I'm just letting you know that I stand firm on really asking for everything that I possibly can.
It's good to go on and on. We enjoy your participation for sure. Do you want to discontinue the operations at some convenience centers and offer curbside collection in a more dense area of the county? That's the next one in line, if we're going to take them one by one.
As far as I stand, I feel like it's one, take it all. If we're going to do it all. Well, what he's saying, I think what Commissioner Piercy's saying is we want to do it for this area, but we might leave it off on certain areas. But I feel like if it's convenience centers, which is what we're using now, that if a company is willing to come in and take that burden off of the county, then I see no reason for this commission not to address that, or at least look at that. Whether we accept it or not is up to us. But it is a price tag, and I'd like to see what it is.
Mr. Chairman, and when whoever comes in and they want to do that, then we sit down with them and say, how do you think we can better serve our citizens with collection? I know one thing that someone would say, and probably we need the public, this committee needs to look at, whether we do or whether we don't, is expansion on some of these facilities. Remember, Almaville, Mac is our busiest facility. We would have to be very delicate, but I think that we own property that Smyrna has been using just over the years from squatters' rights. It's their construction yard that sits right behind our fence off of Weekly Road. And it's actually our property, and they just take their construction stuff and put behind there. If we need to expand, we'd have to depend on our commissioners from Smyrna to go talk to city council and say, sorry, but we need our property back that you've been sitting on for a while. But those type things that, that we would be able to negotiate with whoever that wants to expand or rearrange, or, from traffic flow and how all of our convenience centers are. Some may say, well, you don't need this convenience center here. You can enlarge this one over here and still hit the same population, from a drive time standpoint, probably just reevaluate the whole thing. This is going to cause everything to take new eyes to look at it, everything we're doing from our trash flow is concerned.
Larry?
Becky, do you perceive when we receive the bids, if you will, that the different companies will have, they'll have their basic program or what they want to attempt to do and what it would cost? Will there also be add-ons that we can do this and that it would have this cost? We could also do this. Do you perceive that we'll receive that in that manner, that they'll come in with different levels of service and the cost of those services?
I do, and we can ask for it that way. I would equate it to a vehicle. If you're going to buy, say, a pickup truck, this is the pickup truck you want, this is your base model, and then you're going to add whatever the features are that you want. In other words, you have a base model. Basically, you'll have collection, transportation, potentially processing, and then you'll need a disposal point. So you'll need all of the functions, but what those look like and how, what the pieces of that puzzle would look like are things that you would get to choose and get to consider, and then do like an a la carte menu of pricing, so that if they take over the convenience centers, this is what it would cost, whether it's per ton, per site, per population, whatever that number is. I'm not sure how they would measure that, but they would have their own way of measuring that. But you would then have that value or that factor to use in your decision making.
Any more questions on this page?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. P?
well, since we're talking about convenience centers, I'm in a very rural area. You can look across the front yard there, you don't see any neighbors, and they're up over the hill on one side and I don't know, quarter mile on the other. So I don't expect to get curbside service out here, and there's still a lot of rural areas that won't. So to me, the convenience centers, the way we've got them set up, I think are pretty good. You know, Mac asked us to do a little homework, and you know, I kept up with what I was throwing away. One was a TV, which I couldn't take care of at the convenience center. That had to go in to town. But the kitchen waste, I compost. But plastics, metals, newspapers, you know, I was all able to take those to the county convenience center, and I sort them out myself. So that works, and I whether we run them or somebody else runs them, I don't see us doing away with the convenience centers, at least in the very rural areas.
Okay, thank you. Going back to what the mayor mentioned there about the convenience center down in Smyrna, I believe it was.
No, that's Weekly. I'm sorry. Weekly's the
There's-
busiest.
Several of the convenience centers that we already own land in addition to what they're using and land behind. The one at Las Casas has got a full acre behind it, not being used at all. The one out on 231 at the Rock Crusher, isn't that unlimited to how big that could be right there? The county owns it.
Rock Crusher,
Our convenience center is sitting on the Rock Crusher County Quarry property, so that's a lot of property there. Just that acre or so is all we have of it, though.
County doesn't own the Rock Crusher property. The county owns it,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
wouldn't be in trouble to expand that.
No.
So, not at all.
but Walter Hill's kind of
Well, Walter Hill's tight.
Walter Hill is owned by Republic Services.
Chairman
What?
Piercy, I want to answer Commissioner P's question. I'm not asking to stop convenience centers. I'm simply asking to manage it, take over the management of our convenience centers. So I just want Commissioner P to know I don't at all want to get rid of the convenience centers. I just want Tim to take over the management of it. Or what price is that?
Yeah, I understood, Commissioner.
According to the state law, if you have 95% curbside collection or more, you're not required to have any convenience centers. If you have less than 95%, you are required. And then the requirement is based on two ways you can calculate it, either based on population or based on square miles. And the square miles, like Murfreesboro does curbside collections, you take out that size. Percy Priest Lake, Smyrna Airport, just the big stuff you take out. And by square miles, and you take those things out, we were required to have 9. If you did it by population, we probably don't have enough. We probably do not have enough centers. When the centers were put in years ago, the Blackman area was nothing but farmland. There's not much farmland out there, so that's the most underserved county portion, non-city limit portion that does not have a center. They drive either to Almoville or Weekly Lane or, some direction away from there. But if you take the Almoville, Weekly Lane, and Sand Hill, which is in Laverne, all three of those on the north side of 840, that's 51% of what this department does out of those 3 centers.
Since all the centers were built, what would you estimate our population had done? Double?
Since they were built in the late 80s?
Yeah. So we're trying to furnish probably double to triple the amount of people with what we built in the 80s. That could be a problem. Becky, do you have anything else to add before we flip the page on this?
I don't. I would just say, as far as rural collection, convenience centers have been proven to be the best method or the best service to be provided. Again, the collection at the curbside would be in the more dense or residential areas that are subdivision-type residential developments.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else before we turn the page? Mr. Nolan,
Already turned the page. I'll wait till you turn.
don't rush us. Now, this one's really interesting. Does the county want to continue providing services to the school? If so, what services should be provided, and should there be a charge to the schools? Let's have a comment on that.
What do we charge now? I mean, we pick up, don't we?
The way the schools, now this is City of Murfreesboro and Rutherford County schools. We do both of them. Commissioner McAdoo explained to me how we started with the city schools. When the convenience centers started to be purchased or rented or donated, we were not going to put one inside the city limits. City residents complained. So the agreement was, and it's a handshake agreement written down nowhere, is that we would pick up city schools in lieu of a convenience center. So that's how we got started. The schools have grown, but each school's building is responsible for buying their own container. We provide the truck and the driver, service it and dump it, and they don't pay anything. A few years ago, we wanted to try to get a little better control because they could build a new school and put 10 dumpsters out there and expect us to dump them. So we do a calculation now based on student population of how much service they receive, and it causes them to have to recycle. But as far as them paying us, they're paying the county, no. But it's still, my budget comes from this body just like the school board budget does.
Any more thoughts about the school trash? Becky, do you have anything on this?
I would just say the reason that's on there is because some counties and/or cities do choose to charge their schools because it's separate entities. Also, in a lot of cases, they're considered commercial operations or institutional operations, and so that's why that question was posed. We had talked about it probably 6 or 8 months ago about should we be recycling in the schools, or how else could we help the schools, or what should that look like? That's just something you need to consider as we move forward.
Mr. Chairman, since it's not going to be for free anymore, everybody's going to be charged. So, I mean, in that aspect, I mean, the school's going to have to be. I'm not sure how that's going to present itself as far as invoicing, but if everybody pays, that includes the schools too. I guess the other question I would have is if you have curbside in your municipalities and you have convenience centers for the rural areas, does everybody pay the same? Does the rural residents pay the same as the municipalities for their residential trash now? I'm trying to wrap my brain around
I think
that
the
aspect.
city's going to pay more for curbside, right?
Yes, if you have curbside collection, my thought, of course, y'all figure out what you want to do, is we'll divide up where we want to have curbside collection, 6,000 homes in a route, and put that out for bid. 6,000 homes with an automated side loader is a route day, for the whole week. And then so whatever it costs, then that's what they pay as a fee, not taxes, it's a fee. And then in the convenience centers themselves, there would be some kind of fee, user's fee. Would we remove the center? We've got sitting in Laverne, sitting next to their ballparks is a center we rent from them. I think it's $1 for 20 years or something like that. We own the property in Smyrna, and we own the property out at Almoville. So I think those centers would still exist. They would not be as busy as they are today. But I know a lot of people from outside the city limits of Smyrna that go to Weekly Lane to dispose of their trash. Because they're right there at 840 and Jefferson Pike. Which direction you go? You go to Walter Hill, you go to Weekly Lane. You got a center on both ends.
I can see Mr. Blair's point. Everybody will pay. But a school, of course, you don't know who's going to do it. We don't have any idea yet. They may treat them as a commercial business since their volume of trash they will have. But will we not need their food waste to make a compost facility function.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's where it comes down to after we decide who we want to do business with on an RFP, we sit down and start haggling. You know,
Yeah.
okay, you got this, we're going to provide this to you. Now, what are you willing to give us? You know?
I think you treat the schools just like Mr. Harris was speaking of, when in the RFP, get an RFP for the service. I mean, we can provide them with the several service level, how many containers and how many days each week, each school.
You know, because these companies have to have the feedstock in order to make a profit. I mean, they're a not-for-profit, so they need the feedstock, whether it be all the excess food from the cafeterias in our schools, or whether it be every grocery store that throws out whatever's spoiled. They're going to need that feedstock, especially a Fulcrum or the company from Brussels will need that type of composting stuff to put in to make diesel fuel or jet fuel.
And through this process is right now, until Middle Point closes, we have free disposal. So whatever vendors come in and provide services for trash, they're not going to get our trash. We're still going to go to Middle Point for free. We're not going to pay somebody to dispose of it when we have free disposal. So they're going to have to build their business without us. So if you're controlling some of the direction of things through the bid process, then you can help them do that. Or they're going to wind up having to bring stuff from outside.
Todd, you're in deep thought. Got any comments? Okay. We'll move away from the school. The next on the paper is processing. Rutherford County does not manage enough residential waste through the existing structure to sustain a processing system. Outside material will be needed to be allowed for a processing facility to be profitable for a private partner. Will the county promote use of recycled products? What's your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, promoting the use of the recycled products, I think that would come as part of our educational process of how do you promote it. We use our PIOs in every city and our county PIO and get into the schools and start promoting the use of that. We got to educate the public, and with their help, whoever it may be, that I'm sure they've got promotion dollars allocated in their budgets as well, because they're going to try to maximize everything that they possibly can. So it almost becomes a P3 of us working jointly with whoever we decide to do business with in a public-private partnership and promotions of all these products we're collecting. It's got to be a community-wide event. Changing the pendulum, if you will, the culture of how we dispose of our stuff right now. We can't even can't even remember what we threw away this past week.
Mr. Harris?
Chairman.
Mr. Dodd?
Chairman, yeah, so I just want to dig into that comment that we don't provide enough volume. That's Rutherford County as a standalone, our 46,000 tons, right? And we essentially we could have a partnership with the city, which brings us to 80,000 plus tons per year, 84, something like that. We have potentially 300,000 tons plus. If every individual in the county does a ton. So I think this is just a critical point, and this gets back into the flow control too. If we just look after our MSW, we could produce 300,000 tons, which would be enough for a lot of these processes. And then that gets the flow control says that if it's what I've read is if it's a publicly owned facility such as a transfer station or a MRF, we could compel waste haulers to come to that location. If it's privately owned, we could not force anybody to go to that location, is what the Supreme Court stated. So I just think this may be a critical juncture right here, is how much can we generate. Becky, and I don't know if it's a matter of, so unless we get the collection in our minds, unless we choose what is our collection method going to be, we can't tell anybody how many tons we're going to have, right?
Residential food waste is going to be a small piece.
Correct.
Your industries, your hospitality type industries, and nursing homes, things like that is where you're going to get you bigger bang for your buck for food waste.
But all the other solid waste. So like so many of these elements, I keep hitting a brick wall. I run it up to a point, and it's like, my goodness, this is just so large. This is so big. It's hard to get my arms around as well. But we've got to have some way of determining how many tons we're going to produce for anybody to look at this, aren't we?
And the number of tons has a factor on, how much they can process, what the price would be. Picture the landfill if they didn't have the volume they have. They had a much smaller volume. If they only were accepting Rutherford County waste. Picture the landfill now if it were only accepting Rutherford County waste. They would have equipment sitting still. They would have people standing idle. They would have a scale house that wasn't operating all day or in the same capacity. So all of a sudden the cost goes up because the operation isn't as efficient. And that's true of any function. If you choose a MRF, if you choose a compost site, if there's not enough volume coming in the gate to keep things moving consistently, then the efficiency is not there. So then the cost goes up. It's strictly an economics, supply and demand type relationship.
And the flip side of that is if we do business with a compost company and we don't have enough, then they're going to ask 17 counties to bring their trash to Rutherford. And,
yes, in order to make ends meet.
Somehow we have to channel Rutherford County trash with flow control, to legally have flow control. It's just, again, I don't have a conclusion to this comment, but this is terribly complicated. We're going to have to somehow incorporate collection to make sure we know how many tons we're going to present to an end user or a facility. Are you with me?
You're almost going to have to work your problem backwards. You're almost going to have your answer and then work backwards to get your problem solved. We're going to use Middle Point as long as Middle Point's going to be open. So if we're going to be doing business with these companies, they're going to have to be able to bring their items in from somewhere else with knowing right up front as we come on board that if you've got too much business coming from somewhere else, they got to go. They got to go somewhere else. Unless they expand their business or something like that. What we're up against is going to be a really, really hard thing to answer.
Mr. Harris?
Well, we got to assume both sides. If somebody brings trash here, whether we like it or not, it is a possibility. Then we need to know, are they going to pay the county for that host fee? How are they going to pay it? I mean, it can't be what Republic's got right now where they paid the same price they did in 1992. And I'd want them to ask, since we're asking questions, what are you going to pay on the host fee? And what are the increments of the increase of that host fee? Because the reason I'm saying this is as time goes on, we become more self-sufficient. So I think that if we understand that we're 325,000 tons today, but in 2035, it's going to be a whole lot more than that. So we had to not think about now. We got to think about 20 years from now, 25 years from now. And I think some of these companies, like Max said, I agree with you 100%. They're going to have to bring trash in. But we're not going to do it for free. So, like I said, we're going to have to ask that question. The question is that I'm saying is, what are you going to pay as a host, for the host fee, and what are the increments in which it will, rise for us to raise prices on it? Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. P?
Matt kind of throwed a monkey wrench in my way of thinking. And of course, he's right. You know, as long as we've got free tipping fees, we need to utilize that. But I think the problem that poses is we, or at least I, would like to see, you know, some type of MRF facility that's going to be able to sort material that can be recycled. I don't want to put stuff in the ground. Composting is one of the things I'm certainly open to. And like I said, recycling and, you know, maybe a waste of energy, you know, a combination of those three so we can minimize what's going in the ground. You know, so I think Commissioner Dodd hit the nail on the head when he was saying, hey, you know, what are we going to do here? We're going to have to make a proposal, it looks to me, to invite other counties to bring their waste here. If not, we're not going to be able to start a facility, much less give them the waste that they need to run one. I mean, that's evident if we're still sending our stuff to Republic. So I think what we need to be, or, you know, we'll have to vote or come to an agreement on that one way or the other. But, you know, the goal is to be 100% recyclable. And to get there, you know, we're going to have a combination of these things. And I can't see us having that on our own, especially if we're taking our waste for free tipping to Republic in that meanwhile. So I don't think it's fair to even ask an RFP to a company and then say, no, you're not going to go outside the county. But the only other answer to that is if we did not use our free tipping fees and then used our 325,000 tons, you know, a ton per person. So, I mean, I think that, you know, we're getting down to where we're going to have to make a decision which way we're going to go. And like I said, I believe Commissioner Dodd hit the nail on the head there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sereno.
Yes, talking about the promotion, you know, like Mary said, PIO officer, you know, make announcement, or might be, I think maybe good print material, and, you know, like Rutherford Recycle, the other day I looked on the paper, I saw that, and so I look over, stop, and that's why they talking, inform the public, you know, by public TVs, or Channel 3, like we have the 2-3 language, you know, it's Japanese, Laotian, and Hispanic language. So many people who don't have the language, you know, in speaking, so maybe they understand more how to help the community.
I agree.
Any other comments on this subject? Becky?
Only thing I would say about food waste is technically your responsibility as a county is your residential waste, and that's not necessarily going to be where your food waste is generated, or the majority of it. So when you look at food waste alone, maybe it's a decision of your requiring, whether it's restaurants, schools, universities, whatever that customer is or whatever that entity is, you're requiring them to recycle their food waste.
And could we not do that?
Yes.
Under that
You could.
flow control, we could do that. And if a Fulcrum were to come in and say that they wanted the 20 acres down on Singer Road, and they mainly use food waste, there's a rail, they could bring it in put in a rail spur right there off the rail, and they could bring in food waste from wherever they wanted to in order to meet that capacity of feedstock in order to put that out. So, and that would I think in their presentation when Fulcrum came here, do you remember, Mac, how much flow would that cut down on going to the current landfill at Republic? It'd be what, 40, 50%?
Real number, but it was a lot.
It was 60%.
Pretty close.
Mr. Blair?
So for us to control the flow, we have to own, what, the MRF? I mean, because a private entity, we can't, if we're feeding a private entity, we can't control the flow, correct? So what would we have to own in order, I mean, is there an option here that we own, say, a MRF, and then then it can be transferred to a different facility?
The point of flow control is that you're controlling the flow of waste to actually keep a facility viable or profitable. That you're actually, in the government realm, you're actually bringing enough revenue in to at least break the operation even. So basically, it needs to be a government entity or a government-owned facility that's financially responsible or financially dependent on government.
Well, I think it would be worth looking at based on the Supreme Court ruling, and maybe how would a P3 affect that ruling, a public-private partnership that we jointly control it. I think that's your best way to be in a partnership with that private entity, and then they agree to the control of the flow of the waste stream coming in. Otherwise you get into the challenge of your commerce laws. That's where people say government can't restrict commerce, right?
That's the whole point.
That's the whole issue.
Well, with a public-private partnership, would the Attorney General be able to say yay or nay on something like that?
We could ask our delegation to give us an opinion on that. Absolutely.
Becky, on the flow control, how would that affect commercial trash that we don't touch now? That other, like Waste Management picks up, Republic picks up, would that restrict them from taking their trash away? Or?
You were going to go to the flow control avenue. I would recommend you stick with residential only because that's what you're required to manage.
So you have a choice.
Because all of a sudden you're needing to manage all of the waste within the county, and all of a sudden you're responsible for all of it. So you're taking more responsibility than you necessarily have to as a county.
So we do have the choice to just do residential and no commercial.
By state law, you're only required to manage residential. Yes, sir.
Residential.
And Steve, if I heard you correctly, we could, the commercial haulers that are private, that go to that are currently picking up trash in more dense populations in the county, we could compel them to come to our facility. Even if the private haulers who are self-employed, a commercial enterprise, so if that was your question, we could compel them to come to our MRF if it's publicly held and maybe some private partnership. Does that make sense?
It'd have to be residential, correct? Residential trash.
I would
hauled by
stick with
private
residential.
haulers. Yeah.
But that's your 300,000+ volume if you start to look at all of the residential.
Yeah, that's what I'm just, and there again, it's a matter of,
Could also have the Attorney General look into on the commercial side, if you had a resolution or whatever the county calls those type ordinances, that food waste be separated out from the garbage and collected and go to another location, and that way, doesn't matter who's picking it up, they still need to take it there.
If we done all residential, how could we get the food waste from restaurants and rest homes and motels, hotels? Because all that would be commercial, would it not?
Would be, but if that's the feedstock that you need, would need to figure out some kind of legal way to manipulate that going to the right locations. And you got to remember also now, we had 12 RFIs. 3 of them deal with food waste and composting type situations.
the CTAS documents that Becky sent out, I think there was some Tennessee Code annotated language that could allow us to compel those hospitality type places and schools to separate their food waste and send it to us, even though it's commercial. I think there was some opportunity there, Steve.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think, did we show that video to you about what they were doing out in Las Vegas with the pig farm? But in Vegas, in all the restaurants, they have the wet garbage trucks. And so those garbage trucks only pick up wet food, discarded food. And so they provide them with, in the containers of each one of the restaurants, they have these big plastic containers and nothing but the scraps of food go into that stuff. And so those specialized trucks come by and pick that up. And so there's ways that they can handle that to where we don't have to hand pick it out. So all that nasty stuff would go in and it provides that feedstock that they were taking out and give to that pig farm outside of Vegas. That's how they were. I suggested that to MTSU that they could do the same, and it could be very profitable at their farm out there. Start raising pigs, raider bacon. What I suggest.
Yeah, yeah, I've talked to them. I think they're on a little different scale of pig farming.
Talk money, Dr. McPhee gets excited.
Mr. Dodd?
Becky, is there a scale of MRF that is small enough that could be placed at a transfer station? And could we have multiple MRFs in Rutherford County, and each of those MRFs put out 2 or 3 streams, and then those streams get collected and carried to a centralized location? Or do MRFs have to be large?
MRFs can be any size you want them to be, but when you start to look at the utilities, and you start to look at location, and you start to look at cost of land, permitting, ongoing operation, yes, there are some small enough that will fit in a transfer station or in like half of a transfer station. Is that financially feasible? It just depends. Again, it goes back to how much waste and where it is and what the cost is and how much the operating expenses are.
Now that brings us down to our next bullet point, material recovery facility as a MRF. What materials should we be accepted and processed? Cardboard, mixed paper, plastic 1 and 2, metal including aluminum and glass.
Can a transfer station sort to some degree, or is it just mass quantities? And can a sorting facility be scalable to coincide with 2 or 3 or 6 transfer stations, so that our MRF can be fed from transfer stations?
But isn't it true, Becky? Isn't it true, Mike? The more times you touch a piece of trash, the more it's going to cost you. So if you're touching it twice, it's going to cost you more than just touching it once. So if you transfer it and try to recycle it there, and then it's going to continue because you got to have trucks to get it to the transfer station and then truck it again, unless you're just taking it to dump it or taking it to one location. But I think we just let whoever's giving an RFP give us their best shot.
To answer your question about can a transfer station separate recyclables, there are some transfer stations out there that accept waste just as you would in any transfer station, and they actually separate it there. Very similar. Some people refer to them as dirty MRFs. In other words, the material you bring in is just garbage and it's separated. The problem with those is, yes, they're efficient, yes, they're easy because no one changes their habits, but the hard part is now that we recognize contamination is an issue and that materials need to be clean, that's not really a good model for that. You don't get a good clean output on the backside, so essentially the materials that you spend the time and money to separate are not of any value.
Anybody else have anything on material recovery or the MRF?
A dirty MRF type collection and processing, the product would be better suited for a waste to energy than actual going to true recycling.
Anyone else? We'll move on. Composting. The output is clean enough, would Rutherford County consider using the compost in local projects to avoid costs associated with purchasing similar material? What material do you think should be composted? Yard waste, food waste, treated wastewater sludge, primarily from municipalities? What role should Rutherford County play in partnering with a composting company? What's your thoughts on composting? Mr. Harris.
I don't want to be in composting. I want them to provide it. So your question is all above is the way I think. I think, we want them to do it. They know how to do it. We don't know how to do it. And so the bid should be from them. I don't see no reason why they couldn't use all four of those anyway.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask
Mr.
back your
Lyle.
question? Contaminated cardboard, contaminated newspaper, other mixed paper product. Is that composting material since it's been contaminated, say be a pizza box or paper that has soft drinks all over it?
Yes,
So-
it can be. As long as it doesn't have the waxy surface, as long as it's just paper or cardboard.
Nolan, you have anything you'd like to add to the composting bullets?
We're just, we don't have that commodity right now, so we got to figure out how to get it if we want to help a company get established.
That's your food waste specifically, or primarily?
Rutherford County, we don't collect food waste independently. We don't do yard waste. Technically we do at the landfill, but we burn it. This would be intended to grind it. And then the treated sludge, we don't have any entities in the county that have sludge. All of them's municipalities.
We ever find out if we could use compost for any building or any dirt fill? Or has it got to be a certain clean or?
I don't know if we did or not. Mike, do you know anything of that?
True compost, once you get it, is going to be decaying, and it's a soil amendment type stuff. So as far as a structural fill, it would not be suited because it's going to continue to decay.
So I guess one of the questions we need to ask on these people who want to do composting is where are they going? Do they have a facility big enough to store this, and then what are they going to do with it? Because obviously, if we can't do what he just said we do, there's going to be a big pile of stuff coming, in a facility. Am I correct on that?
That's one of the biggest challenges of any processing organization or operation. Once you separate it or once you have your final output, what do you do with it? Because that is an opportunity to bring in revenue by selling it, but who buys it? What's the cost? It's what we saw happen with recyclables. So cardboard used to be worth $150, $200 a ton, and all of a sudden it fell to where some cities and counties were actually paying to get rid of cardboard most recently. It's rebounding. It will rebound just like any other market, closer to, and Mac may have a better idea, but the last number I heard was around $50 a ton. So we're starting to rebound some. Do you have a better number than that?
That would be for baled cardboard. We
Right.
don't bale ours. Ours is about $17.50.
Okay.
Facility in Gatlinburg, they were strictly composting, weren't they?
Right.
Yes.
And I presume they had a contract with someone to take what they had, they bagged it or something? Do you know?
They were having a hard time still getting rid of all they produced. Now, they do get rid of some.
There's a large variety of compost out there for people to buy already, every grade possible. You can buy it for $2, you can buy it for $15, same size bags, just different grades. Different grades.
We were out at Newbie Island, California. That compost was going to Scott's. the turf building type company that's purchaser for that product.
Lowe's. In selling point of purchase, Lowe's and Home Depot, right?
The compost company that sent in information, have they got a track record of consuming or utilizing their product?
They do.
Any other thoughts on the compost?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. P?
I think, as we whittle these down and decide, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do a MRF, we're going to do composting, we need to get in our head where we're going to be doing this. Because the last thing I want to do is add more traffic problems in parts of the county, especially where we've already got enough traffic problems to go around. That's something we've got an abundance of. The mayor's pointed out Florence Road area with the rail system. I pointed out in the past, possibly the industrial park up in Laverne, if we're bringing trash in from other entities. But we need to decide, hey, where we're going to do this composting, where we're going to put them. We've got to look at, how it's going to impact our citizens on the highways. And like I said, that's why the mayor mentioned Florence Road having the rail system. And of course, the industrial park in Laverne also has a rail system.
I agree with you 100%. We do need to know what area we're going to locate these facilities in. We also need to know for sure who in our county is going to partner with us and work on this.
Commissioner P mentioned that from his house you don't see any neighbors, so
Yeah.
apparently there's a lot of space in
Got a
that
wide
area.
open space.
But I've never been to his house, but I know what road he lives on. You don't want to send garbage trucks in an area like that. So we need to be, just right off of an interstate or something like that, not way out in the country.
Right.
Other question to think about, you don't have to answer it right now. There is a strong possibility that there will be somebody wanting to buy the Florence Road, Singer Road property because it does have rail. Are you going to be willing to sell it?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
since we're talking about this now, would it behoove us to ask our property management committee to look at what properties we may have available that we could possibly put future MRFs or composting or whatever on? Or is that something we want to keep with this committee? Since they've got an idea of what's available out there, I assume.
Mayor Kitchen, don't you sit on the purchasing committee?
I chair the purchasing committee.
That's what I thought.
That's correct.
I would
I'm
suggest.
talking about property management.
Property management, okay.
Property management,
I would suggest that you keep it inside this committee,
that's Chairman
but it's
McAdoo.
planning and engineering. That's who you talk to. They know where the properties are and what the zonings
Sure.
are and those type things. I think that would be the first ones that you get involved, and then it would go to property management.
May I?
Yes, sir.
Robert, are you referring to property we currently own and the property management has that inventory? Or are you looking at potential sites to purchase?
Well, both. I was mainly interested in what, sites we already have. But, we mentioned a couple of places here. Of course, we own some property there off of, gosh, I forgot the name of the street there. But anyway, we own the property there adjacent to Murfreesboro's composting area.
Singer Road.
And Singer Road.
Florence
Singer Road.
Yeah, I don't know what other properties we have that might work for some of these facilities, and I figured property management would have a handle on that. But I think Mac was right. We can go to planning and engineering and probably get the same information.
Some of those larger tracts of property you're going to find out is going to be real near schools where they have excess property when they purchase school property, but I don't think that's the right location to put our operations.
Mr. Sandlin?
Well, and to kind of answer that question, we'd kind of thought about that out loud, I think, in one meeting or another. But we're going to have to really see what the acreage is needed for certain size composting. I imagine if you did a Sevierville type site, it's a much bigger site than maybe just for food or vice versa. I don't know. So you got to see what that supplier needs, as far as parking, compost site, and then windrowing it and all that. So, I mean, there's just a little bit more to it than we need to know what kind of acreage we're looking at to try to find that, and then the right zoning too, and it's going to probably be a problem somewhere, and probably shouldn't mention this. I hope it's okay, but I was talking to someone in Sevierville this week about another matter in their local government, and they were telling me it's 2-hour wait up there in Sevierville to get their trucks unloaded. The sugars that they're using from, I think, Mars or whoever they're getting their sugars from, it's caused a real problem where they've put this mulch, and the heat has done something to it that's in this mulch type stuff that they've put out somewhere in Gatlinburg or something. It's a mess. It's cost them $30,000 to clean that up. So there's a lot more to it than just what we saw maybe that day. We came on a good day or whatever, and then they're still having some problems with batteries, and we kind of saw that day. There was some metals and different things in that compost that probably shouldn't be there. So we really need to investigate whoever decides or whoever we want to do this composting thing after this RFP to make sure that's what we want in our community as well.
Right.
As well as all the others.
Right.
I'm not saying anything I don't think you're not thinking, but anyway, it just makes me feel better.
Back to the first page in education and culture changing.
If a facility, if a company does composting, and that's part of their overall, why not ask for it? If they provide recycling, composting, and all those things, why we not ask for that? So, yes, we want to see a big company, or yes, I am a bigger company to come in here and provide those kind of things. And I think there are ones in this RFP that will do that.
And the question I would ask you there would be, if you choose a company, do you want the company to do all of those functions itself, or are you okay with it using a third party, or what kind of control do you want to have over that? And we'll use composting as the topic. And that would just be a question. Are you okay with them contracting with whoever they want to contract with, or do you want them to be the person or the contact for that function?
Yes, I want to see it as a one complete whole bid. So if they do what they do, that's no different than, I think, Fulcrum is a third party with waste management. So those kind of things, I think that would be perfectly fine. But please let me also reiterate, liability falls strictly upon them and not us.
Amen.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. P, go ahead.
the further we get along this, and I've already mentioned it once, and I know that the mayor has stated the goal that he wants Rutherford County to strive for zero waste. I know some of the private groups that recycle, SOCM, for instance, Recycle Rutherford, I think their goal too is toward zero waste. And I just kind of want a commitment from this committee. Is that what we're after? Or we're going to try to go for zero waste? Because if we are, then we're going to have to use a combination of different type facilities. We can't say, well, we'll just do a MRF and we'll recycle what we can and the rest will go in the ground. But I'm kind of curious how the rest of the commissioners feel. Is zero waste your goal too?
Comments?
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman, before we start getting answers? That is still my goal, is to go to zero waste, but after our trip out to California and the more I've learned since I've made that statement, because everybody likes to make that statement, is that there is no really zero waste that is possible, because there's just always going to be some residue left over. There's no possible way to do zero waste, but it's good for marketing, it's good for education, to get people going in that direction. But am I correct, Becky?
And your goal could be zero waste. Just understand, you want to define what zero is. Zero is not nothing. Zero is we want to get to 80% diverted from landfills, or we want to get to 65% waste to resource, waste to energy, whatever that component is, you just define it as such. So zero is not really nothing.
So I now have a disclaimer. I've learned there's still going to be something left, but it's still a great goal to have.
Well, I think everybody realizes that, and my thought is that is the goal. That doesn't necessarily mean that we can get 100%, but we want to keep striving and get as close to it as we can.
That's right.
So Becky, I've wondered this, and I guess it's a good time to ask. A few industries, few companies are sending their waste out of state to have that classification of zero waste. So is that the only true time you can say, if I'm a company or a producer or something, I have zero waste for my XYZ company by sending it out of state? That's a true zero waste?
It's the type of facility they send it to. So there are several companies that are sending waste down to Covanta in Huntsville, because it truly is an incineration. It's a waste to steam or waste to energy process.
Remember when we toured that, they still had stuff that went to the landfill out the backside. So zero, like the mayor was saying, is not quite
That's what I
there. But I agree with Mr. P. We're going to shoot, our goal is going to be zero, and we're going to let everybody know through our educational piece that we're trying to get to zero, but let's get to 80% first. And then once we get that one, let's take the next step.
Mr. Harris?
Yeah, Commissioner P., I am for trying to get to as low as waste as we can, but I'm also, you got to understand, I'm looking at this as a business side as well. I'm trying to find a bidder who can provide recycling, composting, and those areas to help us get down to that. And I think that's what we're kind of looking at here, at least I am, is looking at it in a business side, that we want a facility that can do all those things and to come in here in this county and help us get to that goal. That's where I'm looking at as far as bidding and asking for money and situations like that. So I hope that answered your question.
Oh, it did.
If nobody has any more on composting, we'll move on to the transfer station. First bullet point says the city of Murfreesboro is discussing a transfer station. Republic Services mentioned a transfer station and one active permit in Rutherford County at this time for a transfer station. In my readings, I believe there was more than Republic that mentioned transfer stations in their packets on the RFIs. Mm-hmm. Did they not? I thought they did.
Yeah, there's several.
And I have heard the city is in some light discussion of looking into a transfer station. Becky, would you care to expand on any of that?
They've actually put some money aside, and I'm not sure of the total dollar amount, but they've put some money aside in their capital improvement plan to actually designate that for a transfer station. But I'm not sure that they found a location or bought property or any of those steps. They have not applied for a permit, I can tell you that.
Well, that answers that question. I was going to say, who has the permit then for the transfer station?
The permit for the transfer station is over on the rock quarry off of, it's the Vulcan site. Give me
Bojack.
Burnt Knob,
Bojack's got it.
the road name. I know it's at 840. What's the? Thank
Old
you.
Nashville Highway's
And
on the
Broad Street. Old
backside.
Nashville Highway is what I'm thinking about, yeah.
Right down from where the park used to be, isn't it? Yeah, the old park.
Is that for a transfer for rock, or is that for a transfer for trash?
It's a transfer station permit.
For
So-
trash?
Well, it could be, yes.
I'd like to say, what, you could transfer
there's-
whatever you wanted to transfer, I guess.
And they would, so they have a permit, but they haven't broken ground, they haven't built anything. So essentially, once you have the permit in place, I mean, you still have to follow through all of the process and procedures of this is what we want to do, this is what we want to transport or transfer. This is what we're going to be managing, and they'll be actually inspected under the normal circumstances or under the normal standards.
Are you saying the state is the one who issues those permits?
Yes, sir. People actually fill out application for them, and then the state issues them based on the information they're shared through that process, through the permitting process.
So
if
there's
it's
no input.
Go ahead, Commissioner, I'm sorry.
So there's no input from a county or municipality where it may be located as to whether they zoning, whether they want it there. The state has carte blanche decision making.
Permit by rule on a piece of property that was already zoned correctly. And it's my understanding the piece of property is actually in the county, but right next to the city limits. City limits on the other side of the railroad tracks. So if the Jackson law were to apply, which it doesn't in this case, then the county and the city both, and possibly Smyrna would be within a mile of it. So it'd be three governments get involved in it if it hadn't already been zoned properly.
what Robert's talked about in general, would just anywhere in the county, would the state receive the application and approve or disapprove with or without our participation?
That is possible. Now, on a landfill type permit, it would have to go through the Central Tennessee Solid Waste Regional Board.
Transfer station specifically.
Transfer station, I don't think does. It would just be landfill type process. Yes, if we were going to reclaim our landfill and have to get another permit, we would have to go through that process and the public hearings and all that kind of stuff.
Mayor Kidd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are two different models of transfer stations that I'm familiar with. One is, in talking with Craig Tyndall, city manager here in Murfreesboro, the one that he'd been working with Joy and his crew. What they have in mind for a transfer station is locating, I think they were looking at a piece out on Joe B. Jackson, and since they have a solid waste division inside for the city of Murfreesboro, they want their trucks out on the city streets picking up, and the faster they can dump that load and get back out and pick up faster within the subdivisions, within the corporate limits, and then so they would get back into the subdivisions quicker, and then they would have probably knuckle boom picking that stuff up and putting into a larger semi to take to the landfill. The one that I'm familiar with that Deputy to the Mayor Sandlin and I visited down in Coffee County, there in Manchester, right off the interstate, but it backs up to the Sheriff's Department. They bring in trash from Warren County. They bring it in from 4 or 5 different counties. They dump it on the floor, scrape it over, and the way the floor comes in, they back in there, and then the semi open top truck is right at grade level, and they take that knuckle boom and drop it down in there in the back of that long haul truck, and boom, there he goes. He takes off, and they're driving all the way from Manchester up Monteagle Mountain down through Hamilton County and back around, going up to Cleveland to East Tennessee. That's a private concern, private sector company doing that, but gosh, I think long haul, they're just getting it out of the counties instead of going and whatever they're paying tipping fee once they get over to Cleveland or Bradley County. But I can't imagine what the cost would be on those trucks going up and down Mount Eagle, and they probably only get three trips a day, max. And if you got bad weather with ice and stuff, they probably don't even try to get over Mount Eagle. That's a tough mountain. So I think would be fair to ask in RFP, what type of transfer station do you have in mind? You know, you gonna haul it out of the state, take it down to Alabama, or are you just gonna dump it and pick it up and take it to the landfill or to wherever facility, composting or recycling facility you have?
I really think that's something we need to look at seriously, is a transfer station. Even if they take it to another landfill, see what it would cost, get the dollars and cents on it, so we can weigh it against what some of this other is going to cost when we go to our citizens and tell them what it's going to cost them to throw their trash away. It could be close, it could be very far apart, who knows? But I'm sure there's companies out there willing to bid on putting in a station, taking our trash and doing something else with it. You know, they may take it to a facility somebody else puts in similar to this, or a larger place. But I really would like to see the dollars and cents on what that would cost the county. That'd give us something to weigh back and forth against composting or waste of energy or whatever. We need to know. And that way there won't be a question somewhere down the road. Because I've had several residents ask me, well, why don't you just haul it to another landfill? Well, let's show them what it costs. And then they may say, well, we told you. Or we may say, see why we didn't. So I think it's something we need to look at close. Mr. Nolan.
Doomsday scenario. Some terrorist group comes in. They take out the Walter Hill Bridge. They take out the River Bridge there on Betty Ford, and they take out the Las Casas Bridge. How are we going to get to the landfill? We're going to go all the way around up toward Nashville and then come back to it somehow. But if something were happened where we could not get to our disposal location today, we have no other place to go. We don't have a contract with anybody.
Anything else on transfer stations? We're going to move on to waste of energy. How many years would you like for it to be viable? What do you want to happen to the output? If the output becomes no longer available in our area? Some serious questions. Basically, what you going to do with it? Whatever it makes. Who will use it? Becky, would you care to comment on this one?
So in the RFI, we had talked about, we wanted technology that had been vetted or technology that had been proven, and we said we want it to be a viable technology. So do you want a technology that's been proven in one place, or do you want a technology that's been proven in the United States, or do you want a technology that's been proven for the past 10 years? Just think about that as far as what that means to you when it's viable or when it's responsible, or that would be something you would consider. As far as the output, and if the output becomes obsolete, I'll use the Huntsville Covantus site as an example. Right now, their output is steam. And if their buyer, the Redstone Arsenal, all of a sudden didn't need the steam, what then would happen to that operation? Would they continue to produce steam and just release it? Would they then try to convert the steam to another form of energy or another form of resource that could be used? That's just something, and that's a long-term, that's a long-run, long-term question. But as with compost or anything else, if all of a sudden there's no outlet for the compost, what would you want them to do with that material?
If a company come in and built a compost facility and was operating it on their own would that not be their problem and not the county's?
Yes.
Talking about waste to energy, the proposals that we received are a little bit, there's three different ones, and they're all each a little bit different. But none of those three was producing electricity here. We've had a meeting with TVA and Middle Tennessee Electric. Basically, we wouldn't be able to produce electricity. They're not going to buy enough to make it worthwhile to us. But those companies were producing the fuel source to be sent somewhere else to be converted into energy. So that kind of helps us a little bit, because you don't have to worry about finding the energy user here, just the fuel source user.
Mr. Blair?
Mac, do you know what the weight difference would be if you incinerated and it may be actually the material that you're incinerating, a ton of incinerated trash would become what weight in ash? Would you know?
Somewhere around 80 to 85% of that weight would be gone, and then you'd have the remaining 20 to 15% that you'd have to deal with, your metals and your ash and some of your other stuff.
Is it asking too much that we ask for some type of facility in the United States? So that gives us an opportunity if we, had to go see a facility or see that. I think it should be proven. I think it should be viable. I think, I don't want us to be a guinea pig, and I could be wrong, and I know I can't, I could be wrong, but I'm just simply saying at this time, I think we need something that's been proven and something we can use, instead of us thinking it might work or it might not. And then we could have another Aruba.
Any other comments toward waste to energy? Do you have out of us, Becky, what you need for that on the waste to energy?
Nothing more. I just think there are lots of options out there to consider.
We will move on to construction and demolition of C&D. Should the county have a role in managing construction and demolition debris? What do you think?
Put out a lot of building permits yearly, residential. So they're adding on to our residential base. And most of those homes are C&D materials. Even the new parts of the home, there's some scraps from it. So I think we need to have a place for it to go. We may not actually manage it or operate it ourselves, but we need to work toward having a facility available.
Basically, all the material that would come from a tornado would have to go to C&D just about, would it not?
It could go to Middle Point. You wouldn't want it to go there because it'd fill it up a whole lot quicker. But yes, most of the material would be, you would recycle what you could recycle. If the tree debris type stuff, if you could, you'd try to grind it up so you don't bury it. If you could grind some of the C&D material, then you could either burn or do mulch with it. When we had the 2009 tornado, we had 3 dump faces at our landfill. One of them was for nothing but tree debris and put it in a brush pile, just like you would on a farm. The other one was in the burn facility, which was tree debris and some lumber. And then the rest of the house type stuff went into the actual landfill.
Why is C&D not considered commercial material?
So typically it is. The reason that we've talked about C&D in this conversation is because, and I'll use your C&D landfill as an example. So all of a sudden your C&D landfill fills up and the next closest solution is for it to go to Middle Point. So now all of a sudden you're filling up that space that's actually been permitted for your residential waste with construction and demolition debris, that's not as quick to compact, doesn't fill the space as efficiently. So that's happened not only to you all, but that's also happened to, if it hasn't happened, it will soon happen to Hickman County. It has happened to Murray County. So all of our counties that have been operating C&D landfills are all of a sudden filling up, just like yours did, and those materials are now filling up the landfills in Benton County, Marshall County, here in Rutherford County. So that space that's been permitted and basically assigned to or built to manage residential waste or any other type of waste is truly being filled up with construction and demolition. One of the things that some communities do is they actually require LEED certification of certain buildings in their community. And so when you require buildings to be built to a LEED certification quality or level, I guess I should say, it's not the quality of it so much as it is what you do with the output in this situation. They're required to recycle in order to gather a certain level of LEED certification on a facility or a building. You have to recycle so much of the material. You have to meet certain criteria for each level, bronze, silver, and gold. And so when you reach certain levels, you've recycled or you've diverted so much of your material from that project to an alternative location rather than a landfill. So that's one of the things that other cities and other areas have done.
And if you had another Good Friday tornado, how much of that CD landfill space would be taken up, Mac?
Took 10 years of life out of our landfill.
Good Friday tornado.
Friday tornado took 10 years of the expected life of our landfill. Now, somebody that's really better at math than me can figure this one out. When we closed our landfill in in February of 18 is when we stopped taking stuff. Middle Point landfill started taking what we were not. Their 12-month calendar year went to 11 months. A month. What we took in a year was a month of their stuff.
I believe that it was overwhelming on this last one that came through Nashville, Lebanon, all the way to Cookeville. They were scrambling, right?
Everyone in Middle Tennessee was scrambling, and then on the tail end of that, we had the COVID-19 clutter clean out. So all of a sudden, everyone was spending time at home and cleaning everything out. We had some of our communities had as high an increase as 70% just within that couple of months of April, mid-March to into May.
I think all the commissioners got phone calls about MAC limiting to one bulk item.
And that was so he could manage the regular garbage, whether it's food waste and otherwise, that would cause issues.
Of course, we did not get hit like that, but Davidson County and Wilson County got the hard hit. But not only did they have the damage of the homes and the businesses, that Wilson County lost 2 schools. So they've opened back up, but they've moved a lot of kids around and everything else. But they're actually 2 structures short.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. P.
Yeah, I've got a question, I guess, for Becky. The C&D landfill, since it's taking wood and brush, I'm going to say shingles, things of that nature for construction waste, does it tend to create smell and leachate like the household waste does? Or is it a cleaner operation? I'll call it cleaner, for lack of a better word, I guess.
It doesn't generate a trash smell like the trash landfill does. You get a lot of drywall in there and you get it wet, and then you generate a sulfur type smell, but it's about like smelling a sulfur well, that type smell, but it's not very odorous whatsoever. We're experiencing leachate issues in ours. It does generate some leachate, but it's mostly from the ground, from the rainwater getting into it. Most of what goes into a C&D landfill is dry. You don't take liquids anyway, but there's not much there that, like food waste, when it starts deteriorating, it generates a liquid even in your trash can. But the C&D waste doesn't generate it like that.
Tell us what goes in a C&D landfill.
Thing that's in your home. Think about the way your home is built. The city of Murfreesboro was doing it, and Laverne and Smyrna never used theirs, but Murfreesboro could dump 3 homes per month. So when they were doing their mini project, they would make sure they didn't tear down more than 3 a month. But anything that came from the foundation all the way up to the top of the chimney would come to our landfill.
And we're talking about insulation and everything. Plumbing,
Shingles.
pipes, everything.
Irritating thing for us is when we started looking at trying to deal with latex paint, which latex is actually harmless. They can't take the liquid form in a landfill. We were looking at using City of Murfreesboro's mulch, lining a 20-yard open top, pouring the paint in it and letting it dry in the mulch, and then take it to our landfill, C&D landfill, and dump it. TDEC would not let us do that. That would be a special waste. So that home that we just tore down and all the painted stuff on it, that's fine. We can take it, but we can't paint wood chips and take them.
The next bullet point in construction and demolition, would the county use recyclable aggregate material in local construction? Talking about pulverized glass, shingles, shredded tires. Are we interested in that? Mr. Harris?
Yeah, I think we should be able to use those things. One of the things too in C&D is wood chips, which we could use as mulch as well as the shredded tires for our government buildings as well. So I'd like to look into to see about that right there, and let them know also that we would be interested in looking at that product.
Shingles has already been added asphalt.
Good or not good? Yeah, it is good.
So
It depends on the mix.
Becky and Mac, how much C&D is currently being successfully recycled into these type uses? Are there any statistics on that?
Here in Rutherford County, none.
Nationally, state, I mean, is there a market for glass, shingles, shredded tires? I understand there's some of that's going into asphalt now, but is there a good solid market for for grinding, chipping, and shredding C&D?
Our landfill, when I first started here, we were taking ground up C&D material and using it for alternative daily cover. Now, we only covered, at the time our landfill started, we only had to cover once a month. And then once we got the permit to take the alternative daily cover, then we had to cover every 14 days. They were trying to do away with the once a month cover. But the downside to that alternative waste is it is the drywall, all that type of stuff. So you wind up with pieces of paper. So you wind up with some blowables. But what it was designed to do is to keep the wind from blowing away what we just buried that day. What it did not do is it did not keep the rainwater out of the landfill. So that helped create part of our leachate issue.
What I would just add to that is you have to think about what every time you touch it, it costs something. And when there's no tip fee for landfilling your waste, why would you do anything different? Why would you recycle it? Because it's the right thing to do, I get that. But what's doing the right thing worth? So I was in a position at one point where 2 facilities across the street from each other, one facility would take recyclables, the other facility took garbage. Garbage was $42 a ton to cross this scale, but the recycling side, the price went up to $50 a ton. So all of a sudden, was it worth $8 a ton? I mean, it's the same destination, coming from the same type of customers. All of a sudden, was it worth $8 a ton to call it recycling? I'm just asking. And that did happen.
When our county landfill was open, most of what we put in an open top container in our convenience centers was able to go to a C&D landfill. It cost us money to operate the dozer to push it and pack it. when we could go next door and dump it for free. So we didn't even dump our own loads in there.
Public, didn't they had wood chips that was painted and had all kind of a market for a lot of this stuff. I mean, am I correct? I mean, I thought that's what they were doing.
You are.
So
And
there is a market, there is a product that could be revenue generated.
part of that is geography. Part of that is that they're, in California, they are far ahead of us as far as if you recycle it, what can you use it for? Technically, you could haul anything you wanted to there and sell it to their markets, but that doesn't make sense as far as the economics of it or the pricing of it, the financial balance sheet. So as we start to look at it, you start to connect the state partners as far as specifications for specific materials. You start to connect Rutherford County as a local government, and then you start to connect private industry as an industry and/or business that would potentially either bring manufacturing to make specific materials or use, I'll use cardboard. So recycled cardboard goes into making new cardboard. Pratt Recycling had turned in a proposal or a response to the RFI, and so they would be looking for all of the cardboard they could get that's clean so that they could then turn it back into cardboard boxes or other, cardboard of sorts.
Big difference, Commissioner Harris, from what they do in California to what we're doing here is the state mandates recycling, and they also provide rebate money back for recycling, neither of which happens here.
Anybody have anything else on that? On our C and D. That brings us down to transportation, and I was a little confused at the last meeting. Do we stop before transportation, or do we want to talk about transportation? Y'all be the judge.
We said we would stop
At transportation, all right. Well, that concludes our due list on that part. How far would we like to go in our next meeting? Have a page and a half to nearly 2 pages. How far would you like to travel? If we start at transportation.
We covered 8 tonight, so I think we could cover 5 next time and finish it. Would be a suggestion.
So you want to finish?
I would vote for finishing, yes.
Is that agreeable for everyone? And now we need to agree on our next meeting time. We have September dates. Rachel has showed us showed me the calendar, and the calendar is open on Wednesdays. We have the 9th, the 16th, the 23rd, and the 30th. They're all Wednesday afternoons. One may be a tad bit late because we had somebody meeting prior to us, right?
It should be 5:30.
Yeah, 5:30. She's not going to come any later than 5:30, so we got to come at 5:30.
Our regular scheduled monthly Public Works meeting on the 8th, are we going to discuss any of this, or is it just going to be the regular solid waste stuff?
I would say regular solid waste and leave this to just this. This is enough without any additives to it. Well, I'm waiting on the next available date is September the 9th. Can we go with that? Does anybody have a conflict? Anybody?
I support that date.
There's one. Craig? You good? Mr. Sereno? Mr. Blair? You good, Mayor?
Chairman.
I'm good.
No, Chairman.
Mr. P., are you good with the night? I forgot he was there. He said no.
Be quiet.
He is quiet. He's listening.
Yes.
You're good.
I'll go along with that.
He's gonna go along, okay. September the 9th at 5:30. That covers that. Be prepared to wind this up on September the 9th. It's a whole lot to cover, and it's really not. We'll make it. We'll make it. Anyone have anything else tonight? Any good cheap places to go eat? Anything like Deputy Mayor was talking about paying, so.
Remember the things that you had in your trash last week till tonight? Each of those items will need a home. That's the homes that we're discussing here. So each of those items, like Commissioner Blair, you had a toilet last week or a week before, that would be a C&D type item. It's not really recyclable in any other manner.
Meeting adjourned.